Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Mr. Turner from Streetsville Secondary School North. Go Tigers!
And it's Mrs. Turner from Port Credit Secondary School North. Go Warriors! Good morning.
Good morning. So, as we promised, we were talking about potential for what we would call our first installment of Lit Talk from the Dock. And we got caught up here just after the March break, and we really haven't gone home as a consequence because we're locked down just like you guys are. And it's a pretty okay place to be quarantined. Saw a moose yesterday, so that's pretty awesome. And but
pretty ugly up here right now. It's not the prettiest season, but we're starting to see the green. The ice went out a couple of days ago, and you can see, you will see, our dog, Kiwi, is playing in the lake. And I can't even imagine what the temperature of the water is right now.
I don't know. And so what Mrs. Turner and I, incidentally, students of mine will recognize Mrs. Turner as being a very lucky woman to have a man like me. What we've decided is that we're going to do a couple of little lectures, start a little lecture series, as we talked about, called Lit Talk from the Dock. And so we wanted to show you where we were coming from and where we're headed to.
Absolutely. So let's get started on The Great Gatsby.
Great Gatsby. Fantastic Gatsby.
Fantastic.
Unbelievable Gatsby. Wow.
Is he really great, though?
Well, we're going to have to see.
I guess we will.
Terrific. Let's go.
This is the first time we've done this, and we know we're going to make some mistakes, but hopefully you'll learn something from it. Our goal is to give you a little bit of an overview of modernist literature, and then to actually look at those first 2 pages that you've all submitted your assignments for and do some analysis of that.
Most of them.
Most. I'm still missing a few as well.
I'm still looking for
hopefully
a few,
those will come in really soon, because for my grade 12s, your marks are due really soon.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good.
Let's get started.
Absolutely.
All right. When we look at The Great Gatsby, we're talking about a period of literature called modernist literature. Modernist literature is sort of known from 1918 to 1939. My smart students there will notice that is between the 2 world wars. You had a huge reaction to that war, and that really caused a change in the writing. And because of the other events that were happening, it changed sort of people's approach to literature as well. You had a change in industry, you had a change in technology, you were starting to see mass literacy and education. You had the other big thing, because of the First World War, is that you had a huge questioning that hadn't really happened before of the existence of God, and in some cases a disbelief in God. And so people looked at the writing pre-World War I and said, this isn't suiting our needs. And so there was this reaction. And what, hopefully, that you've read the first couple of chapters, you've noticed that the writing is very different. And that was part of that reaction. You had the Lost Generation. You had this group of writers. You've all watched the video. You had this group of writers.
Most have probably watched the video.
Again, most. We're hoping, right? We had expats who had moved to France, leaving the U.S., again, troubled by the positions and the direction that the world was taking. And so you had Fitzgerald, you had Hemingway, you had Stein, you had Eliot. All of these writers were collectively working and really experimenting with a new style. If you've ever read any works that were pre-modernist, you'll notice it was very descriptive. I know a lot of my students always talk about, oh my gosh, they could go on and on. Gatsby's not like that, right? And modernist writing wasn't like that. It was very to the point, it was very direct, but there was a great deal of subtext in the writing as well.
Man, you're really smart. You're really smart. I've never been in one of your classes, but you're, wow, really good.
Thanks, Mr.
Super
Turner.
terrific, man.
Thanks.
Okay.
I'll continue now. Okay, so some of the themes that you saw in modernist literature, and I apologize, I have to look at some of my notes. We are going to post a PowerPoint for you that has a lot of this. So if you miss some of it, we understand, but it'll be there.
That's Kiwi.
There's Kiwi. I'm not sure if you can see her, but okay, so seriously, some of the themes that you would see included a great deal of decadence. You saw gender roles, you saw impotence, and when I say impotence, I'm not talking sexually. I'm talking about the inability to do anything, to make a change, to have a force, to have a voice. And so that's where this impotence came in as well. You had the idea of alienation, disconnection, the inability to communicate.
I feel I'm suffering from COVID. 19 impotence.
Impotence,
Can't
right.
do
You
anything.
can't do
I
anything.
can't go anywhere. Can't do anything.
We're stuck.
Stuck.
We're stuck. And
Impotent.
again, for my grade 12s, think about what I talked about. That idea of stasis becomes really important in modernist literature. That inability to do anything. You had impermanence, change, and especially in Gatsby, you had the corruption of the American dream.
Corruption of the American dream. Well, we talked a little bit about the American dream and how the American dream is this pursuit of the ideal, that everybody can make it if they work hard. And by grade 11 or 12, we should understand it's really it's a fallacy. It doesn't exist.
Exactly.
It's something that's held up as being possible because that controls the masses to work hard and do all the things that they're expected to do. But for the most part, it's a very difficult thing to achieve for most people.
That's right. That's right. And in fact, Fitzgerald was saying exactly that. People often, when they first read Gatsby, they say, "Oh, it's a celebration of the American dream." Looking at Gatsby, and it's not. Right? One of the things you have to understand is that Fitzgerald is talking about the failure of the American dream, of the inability to succeed, right? Of to move classes, etc. And we'll talk about more about that as we go along. A couple of other things just to keep in mind when we're talking about modernist literature is that it was very experimental in style. A lot of writers, not necessarily Fitzgerald, but a lot of writers used what was called stream of consciousness writing. And that was that idea that punctuation wasn't important, dialogue wasn't important. It was the idea that whatever thoughts you had just flowed. So, wow, there's my dog. My dog is yellow. I like the color yellow. The sun is yellow. But the sun is beside the blue sky. You're sitting in a blue chair.
And you know what else is yellow?
What?
Daisies. Well, they're white,
Daisies.
but they have a
Daisies
yellow
are white
middle.
with a yellow center.
Correct.
But
This is
then
crazy.
if we look at
Crazy daisy.
color, then we can get into a whole other discussion. But that'll be another bit talk from the dog. All right. So a lot of the other thing is, and I mentioned this a couple minutes ago, subtext, right? Is what is being said and what isn't being said. That becomes really important as well. We're always, instead of the author telling us, we have to figure that out. Lots of multiple meanings, etc. Okay, so the last thing that I'm going to say is I just wanted to give a brief overview of Fitzgerald's biography. My 12s, you know that we've talked about whether or not an author's biography has an impact on his or her work. Now, the interesting thing with Fitzgerald, he was a man caught in between two worlds. He had a father who had social standing, no money. He was a total business failure. Mother, okay, really?
Sorry.
He had a mother who had no social standing but had money, and this became very important.
Ka-ching with the bling.
Anyway, all right. So Fitzgerald meets a woman, and her name is Zelda. And Zelda is a wealthy Southerner who won't marry Fitzgerald until he has money. Now, I know we're just at the beginning of the book, but I want you to keep that in mind as you read and hear the story about Daisy and Gatsby. They moved around a great deal. They had a love-hate relationship. They were alcoholics who partied a lot. In fact, she had to be committed because of her alcoholism. And they had one child, and he ended up actually dying in pretty obscure poverty. I think he was 41, if I remember correctly. So he was quite young. But the interesting thing is, the summer before he wrote Gatsby, Zelda had an affair.
Uh-oh.
So think about how that ties in with what's going on in the story when we get there. So,
Sure.
All right. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Turner now. He's going to talk a little bit more, and I'll jump in as well, but he's going to talk a little bit more about those first 2 pages.
So, the assignment that we gave you is one that's really, really important to get things rolling in terms of understanding the novel itself, and more importantly, our narrator. So, at any rate, behind you is a dog rolling a softball down a dock. So if you hear that tick, tick, ticking, or the dog jumping into the water, it's because that's what Kiwi does.
The water's 41. 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Yeah.
So, wow. Maybe I'll throw you in later.
Oh, gee, thanks.
Oh, that would be good. Okay, anyway.
Back to work.
So we're trying to get you to dig deep into the meaning and understanding of what Nick is saying in these first couple of pages. And he says a lot, and he says a lot in a very complicated way. He says, in my younger and more vulnerable years, my father gave me some advice that I've been turning over in my mind ever since. Whenever you feel like criticizing anyone, he told me, just remember that all the people in this world haven't had the advantages that you've had. So right away, we're finding out that Nick lives in a world where he is more than likely privileged, and that there's a degree of advantage. We can assume that that's money, but it goes deeper than that.
Can I just jump in with the vulnerable? I think it's interesting when we look at diction. When he says that he was vulnerable then, in my younger and more vulnerable years, what does that tell us about Nick? He sees himself as not vulnerable now. He has put up that wall.
Exactly.
He's not vulnerable.
Exactly. He's talking to us from a place of experience as far as he's concerned. And he says, my father, he didn't say anymore, but we've always been unusually communicative in a reserved way. And I understand that what he meant a great deal more than that. In consequence, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about reserving judgments, that means that we don't judge other people. Judgy. And so, hey, whoa, that was unfair. Anyway, so if we're going to reserve our judgments, it means that we're not going to make determinations about a person's character or what they are based on, well, we want to wait and see.
But keep reading. Keep reading the next sentence.
Right. He said, I'm inclined to reserve all judgments, a habit that has opened up many curious natures to me and also made me the victim of not a few, veteran bores.
Judgy?
Judgy.
Judgy?
Judgy. Okay. And then he goes on to suggest the abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it happens, when it appears in a normal person. He's saying that he's the normal person and that other people who come to tell him are all abnormal. I think this happened to us once in a dog park.
That's right. Do you remember that man who came up and told us about his ex-wife?
Crazy.
They
were going out on a date.
Going on a date that
That's
night.
right, yeah. And then we had remember the woman? That was a crazy story too. And people do this to me all the time because the abnormal mind attaches itself to normal people.
Normal?
Yeah.
But think about it. What he's essentially saying is weird people talk to him.
Weird people talk to him. Talking to weird people. Okay. And he says that that the abnormal mind is quick to detect and attach itself to this quality when it appears in a normal person. And so it came about that in college I was unjustly accused of being a politician. Now, this is questionable in terms of he doesn't mean a politician like Donald Trump.
Right.
Boo. But
hey.
oh, sorry.
No.
We don't judgy. Okay. And so no, what he's suggesting is that a politician is somebody who tries to please everyone. That's what the politician does. And as a consequence, he himself is accused of that in university because he really doesn't take a stand on anybody. Okay. Because he was privy to the secret griefs of wild, unknown men, most of the confidences were unsought. He says he never looked for those things, those discussions that people came up for. And frequently I have feigned sleep, preoccupation, or a hostile levity when I realized by some unmistakable sign that an intimate revelation was quivering on the horizon. So basically what he says is that sometimes he pretends that he's asleep or that he's busy because he sees this person coming and he doesn't want to hear their stuff.
We've all done that.
Yeah, okay. And what he says, the intimate revelations of young men, or at least the terms in which they express them, are usually plagiaristic. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're lying. They're stealing stories or they're embellishing
The fish
them.
was this big.
It was this big.
Fishermen say that all the time.
Oh my goodness. And marred by obvious suppressions. This is suggesting that they're leaving whole parts of the story out. Probably which parts? The bad parts of the stories, or the things that don't make them look good.
So hold on a second, Mr. Turner, then. What is Nick telling us then? That people, humans, human nature allows us to do what? What do we want to do? We want to suppress the bad parts.
That's right.
We want to tell stories
Facebook.
that aren't... But who's telling us the story?
On my Instagram feed, I never put the bad picture of me.
Of course you don't.
I don't have an Instagram feed.
No, you don't.
Don't follow me on Instagram because you can't find me.
Let's keep going.
And he says, reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. So what he's suggesting is that there's something positive about reserving judgment because it allows us to be hopeful that people are going to ultimately be good.
Hope's going to be a word that comes in a lot. Because Gatsby has that hope.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
well, Gatsby at the edge of the dock. Okay.
Kiwi doesn't have much hope right now.
Pardon me?
Kiwi doesn't have much hope right
He's
now.
having trouble. Okay. Reserving judgments is a matter of infinite hope. I am still a little afraid of missing something, and if I forget that, as my father snobbishly. That sounds like a bit of a judgment.
Judgy judgment.
Okay. And I snobbishly repeat. He himself is a snob, he's suggesting to us. A sense of fundamental decencies is parceled out unequally at birth.
What are fundamental decencies, Mr. Turner?
I don't know.
Kindness,
Kindness,
generosity,
manners,
honesty, manners. So what's he saying about that they were parceled out unequally at birth?
Well, it seems to me that he's suggesting that his father was telling him that he gets all the good stuff, whereas other people, probably people who are uneducated or poor,
don't get
those things.
If he's saying that to us on the first page,
Oh, man.
do you think he might be
Telling us a
dropping
lot.
us something or not telling us something?
Well,
exactly.
I think so. Nick goes on to say, and after boasting this way of my tolerance, I come to the admission that it has a limit. So here we are again. He's telling us he's a very tolerant person, but in the same breath, he's telling us, I got limits, man.
Contradictory?
Okay? Yeah, a little bit contradictory, all right? And so he says, conduct may be founded on hard rock, that's solid, okay, or the wet marshes. But after a certain point, I don't care what it's founded on. And so essentially what I think he's suggesting is that because he is a privileged individual, that his conduct, his diligence, his behavior, his abiding the law, his hard work ethics, all of those things are hard rocks that one begins a life on. And then we have wet marshes where people who have soft character will probably begin from.
And soft character is equal to poor people.
Poor people, people with lower class,
Right.
people who aren't well educated.
Right.
Okay? Those fundamental decencies.
That's right.
And so he
The wind
says,
is picking up right now.
the
Sorry,
wind is
folks.
picking up, and he says, I felt, so he says, when I came back from the East, and we know that the East is kind of in that New York kind of area, right, of Eastern United States. So we know that he's come back, and we do know, we eventually find out he's from Chicago, which is in the Midwest. When I came back from the East last autumn, I felt that I wanted the world to be in a uniform and sort of moral attention forever. Moral attention. Moral attention is essentially when you have this idea that you are strict, you are disciplined, you are rule following, and you behave, right? So he's suggesting that maybe what he came from, whoop whoop party, right, guy? Okay.
Can I just interrupt for a second?
You betcha.
So when we talk about as well, we have to consider that idea of East and West. And this goes back to the whole American psyche of that idea of go West, right? Because the East was already established. And so I want you to think about East and West constantly. It's going to become so vitally important in that idea of what does the East represent and what does the West represent.
Represent.
Okay, get back to it.
Okay, I wanted no more riotous excursions with privileged glimpses into the human heart. Riotous excursions with privilege.
Righteous!
Righteous. These
No.
are huge
No, it's
parties, and the bad behavior of the rich and famous. Okay.
Lifestyles of
The rich and
really,
famous.
okay, anyway.
And so only Gatsby, main character,
Only.
titular character, as we say.
I like that word.
Titular.
Titular.
Yeah, okay.
Meaning title.
Title. Okay. The man who gives his name to this book was
Hey, that's
exempt.
interesting. Sorry to interrupt. He's telling us he's writing a book,
Correct.
right? He's telling us that it's not even it's
He's
there.
writing a book.
He's writing a book.
Smart guy. Gatsby, who represented everything which I have an unaffected scorn.
All right. He doesn't like Gatsby.
Doesn't like him at all.
He says he shouldn't have.
Shouldn't
Right? He
have.
represented all the bad stuff, and yet keep going.
Gangster.
Yeah.
Who represented everything from which I have an. If personality is an unbroken series of successful gestures, then there was something gorgeous
Gorgeous.
about him.
Love that word.
Gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
You're gorgeous.
Oh, Shush.
I'm gorgeous.
Anyway, but I don't think so. This becomes an issue, guys. Is that, you know, why does he use that word? Why does he use this concept of gorgeous? He says that he shouldn't have liked him, but he did because he was gorgeous. And no, he's not talking about the physicality. Although in the movie version, Leo, my boyfriend, is gorgeous.
Yeah, but boyfriend. Who's?
Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh,
He's my
okay.
boyfriend.
Really?
Yeah.
Lucky. I hope he's got some money.
I think he does.
So he says there was something gorgeous about him, some heightened sensitivity to the promises of life, as if he were related to one of those intricate machines that register earthquakes 10,000 miles away. This is called a Richter machine, and it's the Richter scale. And what it does is it senses the movement in the earth and tells us about when we can expect an earthquake.
Right, but it sort of represents, on a metaphorical level, that idea of that vitality within him, that ability
Yeah,
to...
he can sense.
Right.
He can feel it.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
now,
that's the weekend.
yeah.
I can't feel my face. This responsiveness had nothing to
Really?
do with the flabby impressionability, which is dignified under the name of the creative temperament.
What's that mean?
Creative temperament. I don't know. It sounds artsy.
It does.
It does.
It does.
Okay, we'll go forward from there. It was an extraordinary gift for hope.
Okay. Oh, hope.
Hope floats.
True.
Hope. Okay. A romantic readiness such as I have never found in any other person, and which it is not likely I shall ever find again. Not romance.
No, it's not. But think about, you've got hope, you've got gorgeous, you've got romantic readiness, right? These are words that are good. These are words that are described as a good man, but he should have had an unaffected scorn for him, but he doesn't.
It's like when you're really attracted to somebody who's bad.
You go for the bad boy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's good. I'm going to argue he's the only good character in the whole novel.
It's pretty good. Well, he's even great.
He's great.
Okay, we don't know. Who knows? We'll see.
Please feel sorry for my children. This is what we do all the time. Not really.
Yeah.
Lastly,
Oh, hey,
Yes,
shh,
really.
shh, they're here, so shh.
Yes, really.
All right, last thing. Let's finish this up.
Lastly, no. Gatsby turned out all right at the end. And I want us to think about that when we get to the end and find out just how.
Does Gatsby end up all right at the end?
I don't know. It's a mystery. It's what preyed on Gatsby. So when we talk about it's that stuff inside Gatsby that chases him like a wolf chases down a rabbit.
There you go.
Yeah. What foul dust.
Ah,
Oh, foul
please
dust. This
pay attention
is
to
bad.
dust.
Ooh, dust. Dusty.
Dust.
Gross.
Think about ashes to ashes, dust to dust.
To dust.
Okay,
Toast.
dust is important.
Bad dust.
I'm
Dirty.
watching our camera woman right now who's rolling her eyes at us and laughing.
And the foul dust that floated in the wake of his dreams. So you see this Gatsby figure pushing forward, and he looks beautiful.
Where do you see a wake?
Wake
Where do we
behind
see
the
a wake?
boat.
Behind the boat.
Right, and so it's
And
not
where do boats go?
in the
water.
Okay.
Water's gonna be important too, folks.
Cooler than the water
Water
in the swimming
pool, yo.
Okay.
We are such
and so,
nerds.
yeah. So well, you're
Yeah.
and
Hey!
so we get this idea that there's a boat going through the water, and the boat looks fantastic, but everything it stirs up in behind this foul dust is bad. And lastly, he says, it floated in the wake of his dreams that temporarily closed out my interest in the abortive sorrows and short-winded elations of men. Nick is telling us, I am fed up. I can't
done.
handle any more. What I've seen is so bad that I need to get to a place that is of moral attention.
Okay, so here's a prediction now. If Nick is talking about the fact that he had that Gatsby was gorgeous, romantic, hope, all of these wonderful things,
Sounds a lot like me.
why does he then say Gatsby turned out all right at the end and yet was preyed upon by this foul dust, was in the wake of his dreams? Why is Nick so angry at this point? And these are all questions you have to be
I
asking.
am so excited to move on.
Well, I think we shall.
Let's go.
All right. So I believe that
That's the Lit Talk
from the dock.
in the can.
There we go.
Boom.
Thanks very much, guys. We'll see you soon.
Have a COVID-free week.
Stop it.
Sorry.